Hey everybody, hope you're doing great. We have another Michael Creighton book. I downloaded all of them, so I like him actually. So he writes stuff. I like is a strong word. I appreciate his works. I enjoy them, but I enjoy them like a little bit here and there. Like there's no way I could power through like a whole series of his books like in a row. Like I would start to like. My eyes would start to roll over. He's got a very particular way of writing that is like, it's a thriller. And I don't know if I'm just not a fan of thrillers that much, but like I like his books and I like his like thought process and the stories and stuff, and they can be kind of exciting. But at the same time, they got a lot of like that old man energy. And I've read a bunch of Clive Cussler books too. And I feel the same way where it's like, yeah, I mean, I like Clive Cussler books. They're like these very like exciting, like old man kind of books. But like, if I tried to read like 2 in a row once and I was like, oh, this is just the same book. So like I need some space. I like the book is good, but it's like not good enough where it's like I want to read the same story like multiple times. Anyway, back to Prey. Prey is what we're going to talk about. It's a Michael Creighton book. So we get an introduction, and Michael Creighton's just talking about the evolution of like machines and stuff. Well, he starts off talking about bugs versus plants, how they're constantly changing in response to each other, you know, their survival of the fittest and all that shit. And then he gives like a warning against not considering consequences of like evolution or forcing evolution, and how evolution with like viruses and whatnot. And then how oftentimes human beings write off past mistakes as like those guys were dumb, and then, you know, modern day we like refuse to learn, which is based, because that's 100% true. Like you can just talk to people and be like, hey, you remember that time we were like under tyranny like 3 years ago with like COVID lockdowns? And people are like, it wasn't that bad. And you're like, you're fucking retarded. It was awful. That was like, we like, people are like, I wonder what it'd be like to live in like Nazi Germany. And I'm like, you remember that COVID thing we did? It's better than that. They didn't lock people in their fucking homes. That's for damn sure. Like, unless you were like Jewish or like a Seventh-day Adventist or something, like you were fine. You were left the fuck alone. God damn, that was awful. That was some like 1986 shit or 84 shit, like for real. And like people are just like completely dismissive of it. Anyway, I could go all day on that, but I'm gonna take a breath and get back to the book. All right, so. And then instead of like evolving bugs and stuff, we're moving to like nanotech and biotech. And this book was written in like the 80s or early 90s. And like, you know, people aren't like, so the nanotech thing is kind of like, yeah, we'll get there someday, I guess. But it is like so hard to build that much kind of like little stuff that like, it is like so science fiction-y. Anyway, and he talks about how like in the 1970s or whatever, the nanotechnology is in its infancy, and that, you know, the people are working on self-reproducing technology, and we're still like in its infancy. Like that has not changed, because like you only micro stuff so much before like you need to build factories that are like micro scale, and that's how they make chips in Taiwan and stuff. Is like making more and more of these like machines that make smaller machines, so they make smaller microchips that are just as powerful, or like the processing capabilities, so they can like slam dunk like a whole bunch in there, but stuff. But anyway, it's an interesting, like, hey, forewarning, I guess. So then the book actually starts, and we get this guy, he's talking about how he's sick or something, and then his kid's like sick, and his baby's like vomiting, and he's like concerned, and hopefully everyone will like survive through the night. And then he talks about this lab being destroyed, and it's like some real creepy shit. And then we go to like day 1. So the main character is doing some house husband stuff. He's buying shit at Creighton Barrel and whatnot. And then he gets a call from his wife, who's going to have to work late. And she's working late a lot. She's doing some nanomachine stuff for some company. And they're trying to get like investment capital. So they're doing lots of presentations and whatnot. And he describes how he was working... how he was like working as like a programming supervisor, like a big tech job. But then there was some like illegal stuff going on, and then like he talked to a lawyer about it. The lawyer's like, hey brother, I think you should just drop it. It sounds like your whole company is like shady as shit. You should just like quit and go somewhere else. And he's like, no, I can't do that. I have morals. And so of course he got like, it all got spun up on him. And so, because he reported like the misdeeds to like the wrong board member. And so because of that, they put like a black mark against him, and he couldn't like get a job in tech anywhere, and he got fired without like severance or whatever. And so it's like, what am I going to do? I guess I'll just be a house husband, because him and his wife have 3 kids. And so we learn all this about this guy, that he's got like a lot of morals and a lot of like feelings about stuff, but also that he's very skilled at finding things and like preventative care and whatnot. So later that evening, after he like considers this and gets back from Creighton Barrel, after the kids are all down and whatnot, the wife comes home, and then he describes how it's weird that, well, you know, he had like weird feelings about becoming the caregiver and such, And then his wife was like super concerned about it because she's a normal woman, and like the husband taking care of the house is like completely antithetical to like the existence of human beings. So anyone who thinks it's not is like retarded. I mean, you can make it work. Obviously, these guys made it work. I've seen it work plenty of times, but you have to adapt for that. You have to understand that there's going to be like a transitional phase, and there has to be a lot of like self-reflection and like intelligence. Otherwise, people are going to like lose their shit, and it's going to end in divorce and cheating and stuff. And then he mentions that, even though his wife's like kind of figured it out, she's more okay with it, that she's still adapting. They then immediately get into a fight about their 12-year-old daughter because the 12-year-old daughter's like on her iPad or something, and she's supposed to be asleep. Oh, there's no iPad. She's on her computer, or I don't know. She's on something. Anyway, this wakes up the baby, and then she starts to get angry, and she goes up and like slaps the baby. They were storming off, and he's like, she's having an affair. Because she's been more aggressive. She looks fitter. She looks like a totally different person. And so he gets the baby calmed down and puts her down. And then she comes up to him and holds him. And she wants to show him this presentation that she gave earlier at work. But it shows her being like super aggressive with like an employee. And it shows the nano machines getting injected into the bloodstream. And they're streaming this video to a monitor so they can like look around inside. And he's like, holy shit, this is amazing. And then he looks over and she's like asleep. And he's like, huh. And then he's like, wait a second, they recorded this demo like days before, not like today. Dun, dun, dun. And this leads us to day 2. While shopping, Jack, who's the protagonist, runs into this homie, Ricky. They talk about some stuff at Julia's office because Ricky works with Julia at the like nanotech place or whatever. At some point, I don't know if I wrote it down here, we find out that she's not actually like an engineer or anything. She's like a psychologist or something. Another one of these like tropes. This guy lives with her psychologist and his books. Anyway, and psychiatrist. So she's like a psychologist that switched over to marketing, which marketing is just psychology for businesses. So easy transition. Like as someone who literally has a degree in organizational psychology as well as other things, it's pretty much exactly the same. You're just your clientele is just like a bigger. It's more of like an organism. It's a different kind of organism, but it's like the same principles apply, right? Just ask Edward Bernays. Anyway. So they talk about life at the office and how she's like super involved in the research, even though she's not like a researcher or anything. She's just like a fucking psychologist, like a therapist. And then how she's been acting kind of weird lately, and which confirms Jack's thoughts that his wife is cheating. Later on, he takes his baby to get some shots, and then he takes his son to soccer practice. He gets into it with his daughter. Julia calls, says she's late again. So they like, all right, kids, let's go get fast food. Hooray. And then he's putting the kids to bed. He sees pictures and thinks about their past adventures, and then he gets pissed. Julia gets home and does something with the baby, and then they start fighting. And it's like very 90s era TV family fighting, like, oh, I'm so angry at you, like very passive aggressive, whatnot. And a little bit later, the baby just starts like losing it, and it's red with this like crazy rash. And so Jake takes the baby to the emergency department. They can't figure out what's wrong with it. The wife calls the wife, but she seems like very unconcerned for the most part about what's going on. Back at the hospital, they did all sorts of tests and finally get to like an MRI. And during the MRI, the baby just like stops freaking out, which is like, that's weird. Why? Usually babies freak out when they're in that fucking machine. Like if you haven't been in an MRI, they put you like in a tube and it's like cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha for like a half an hour. Like it's nuts. I've gotten a few MRIs because I'm broken as shit, but it is not like a pleasant experience per se for most people, especially if you're claustrophobic or like a child who has to like lay there and not move. Anyway, so eventually the rash just kind of like disappears on its own and the baby's acting like great, but the baby is still like all red and stuff, which is like, what the fuck? And at that point he takes the baby and heads home, which leads us to day 3. So Julia's still walking around acting weird. She's looking like guilty as shit, and she's saying things that seem like it's not really a human responding. It's like a machine. I think she makes like a mysterious call and then heads out to work. Jack is really struggling because he's obviously been up all night with his baby trying to figure out what's going on. And his son at some point mentions like, hey, what's with the guys who like came over last night? And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, they kept me up. You know, the vacuum men, they clean things up. They're like a silvery ghost. And Jack's like, you were just dreaming, son. Like, stop being crazy. So he drops the kids off and comes home and he sees the baby is like covered in bruises, right? But it's like happy as shit. So it's like, whatever. So he calls the doctor at the emergency department and says, and is like, hey, I just want to let you know this is going on. He's like, oh, that's so weird. There's another case somewhere else where there's an adult and they at a different location. They were acting the same way. And they gave him an MRI, and then he like got super calm and felt okay and like passed out, and then he had bruises like the next day. It's like no other information. So later on, he picks up the kids, and then the daughter's all sourpotamous because she didn't get the part in the play, and so she cries about it. And then the son, they did have iPads or pods. Maybe this came in a little later in the 90s. So then the son loses his iPod, and Jack opens it up. or not his iPod. Yeah, his iPod, like the old music. So yeah, that would have been like 90s. Okay, so he loses his iPod. Yeah, his iPod, which is just a music player. He opens it up. He finds this like crazy gray dust, and he finds like the memory chip is completely destroyed. And then later that night, he's like, "That's weird. What the fuck?" And so later in the night, he awakens, and his wife is being like super weird. And also, he's like, "Does she look more beautiful? This is crazy." And he thinks it's a dream, which leads us into day 4. So he notices that again, he wakes up, he looks at her, she's like very attractive, but she's like, it's like she's gotten like super plastic surgery, like everything's super tight, like she's got like abs and like looking sexy as shit and whatnot, and like all the baby fat is gone completely. And then they get into a fight, of course, as their son has an issue. And he asks the mom, but then Jack responds, and then she's like, "You're always turning the kids against me. You're making me seem like a bad guy. You never want to help, blah, blah, blah." And then he's like concerned because courts tend to favor the mother in the divorce. And this book takes place in California, and California is like a cesspool when it comes to divorce. Like you could like be having like, you could be like abusive to your kids, and they'll still be like, "Well, it's no fault for any parent." Like, get the fuck out of here. Fucking California. Fucking laws are crazy. Anyway, oh shoot. Sorry, I closed my little notes. Okay, so, okay. He thinks more about like losing his job, and he talks to like a headhunter, and the headhunter is like, "Hey, can you move out of California? There's lots of jobs elsewhere." And he's like, "No, I need to stay here. My wife's got a really good job," and stuff like that. And he's thinking about his field and like thinking about, it's like one of those Michael Creighton things where he spends like half the chapter just like thinking about like the tech field in California and yada, yada, yada. Later, he gets a call from Julia about work stuff. Apparently, she's in Nevada, which is where their like factory is for this nanotechnology stuff. And then he notices the sprinklers are all fucking messed up. And he's like, "What the fuck?" And then he's getting super angry and frustrated, and so he ends up yelling at the kids. That leads us to day 5, where Julia never came home from Nevada. No call, nothing. He calls his sister. Oh no, she's a psychologist. What the fuck was Julia? I don't think she was she was something else. Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, no, the sister is a psychologist, like 100% like a psychologist. And then he explains everything to his sister. She's like, "You should call a lawyer, obviously." And so she's like, "Hey, I'm going to come help out." Let's see. She was also a biology student. Okay. So she made programs and stuff, so she wasn't just like fucking and doing whatever. He was, I'm sorry, that's the note. He started off as like a psychobiological student, so he's making programs and whatnot to like make his research faster, to like do experimentations faster, and then he kind of just like slid right into like tech jobs when the Silicon Valley was first coming up. So he never got like a degree in it or anything, he just like became very good at it. And so he talks to himself about tech in the 90s and how it exploded and everything like that. And then Julia eventually calls and says she reached out and left a message, and she didn't, obviously. So at that point, he runs into his lawyer, just like out and about town, and he tells him about the lawyer's like, "You should get some marriage counseling because it'll help you with divorce." And then he gets a call from like his old company, and this company was like the ones who really fucked him over and whatnot. But this time they want to hire him as a contractor to work for his wife's company, because some software that he like co-developed with like his team, like they're using it over there, but they're having some problems with it or something. And he's like, "I don't know about that, man. You guys are kind of assholes." And he's like, "Well, we just need to know because you got to go out there like immediately. So if you can let us know in like the next day, we'd very much appreciate it." And so he's like, "All right, I'll let you know by tomorrow." And then he calls the doctor back, and they talk about the MRI, and he finds out the MRI has been deteriorated because the memory chips are completely destroyed, just like in the iPod. Huh, interesting. So then the sister shows up because she's like, I don't know, an hour or two away, and she's harassing him about the job, or harassing him about like getting a job, moving out, doing whatever. And eventually he calls Ricky. Ricky's not there. He talks to his wife. She mentions that Ricky is also out at the Nevada plant, and he's out there a lot. And then they bring up the conversation about Ricky and Jack. Brings up some of the... Oh, no, and she talks to him about Ricky, and it's a lot of the same concerns that Jack has about Julia that she has about Ricky, and about like him cheating and about all this other stuff, him looking fit, all this stuff. Eventually, later on in the day, Julia shows up. And then the son is like, "Who's that guy in your car?" And she's like, "There's no one in the car. Go ahead and look." And he looks, and there's nobody in the car this time. And then Julia is like acting like she's on meth, like she's talking really fast, she's really agitated, all this stuff, or some other drug. And the sister's like, "Hey, you doing okay? What's going on with that?" And then at some point she like, "Okay, I gotta go back, bye, like that." And then Jack looks out the car while she's getting in, and she sees her talking to somebody who's in the car, and that person seems to like fade in and out of like reality or whatever. He mentions this to his sister, and she's like, well, obviously you need to face reality. Your wife is cheating on you. You need to call a lawyer and yada yada. So he tries to call his wife on the car phone, and the phone rings, but the police answer. And apparently Julia's car like rolled off the road, and so he drives out to see what's going on. So Julia's stable. She like maybe broke an arm or something, and so he goes with her to the hospital. She starts saying a lot of crazy stuff about it's only an adolescence. It didn't know what it was doing, some shit like that. It didn't do anything wrong, yada yada yada. He's like, okay. So he goes back to get the car that rolled over, and there's some guy there who's like, hey, you can't take it yet. There's those guys over there trying to do something with it or whatever. And it's a white van. And these guys in a white van who look like, and they mentioned that it's somehow related to like the wife's work and like stuff she was doing, and they gotta like examine something or whatever. And so he's like, all right, I gotta go out there and figure out the fuck's going on. So then he calls his old company at that juncture, and I think the guys have like the vacuums or something. They look like just like the son described. And he's like, wait a second. Hold up. Wait a minute. And so he calls his old company and is like, hey, you know that job you offered? I'll take it. And that takes him out to the desert. And at this juncture, pretty much the rest of the book takes place on day 6. So everything up to this point is like essentially a prologue. It's just like introducing characters, concepts, and things. And then day 6, when he actually heads out to the plant in Nevada, is when the story like kind of actually begins almost. Not the story, but like all the action and intrigue and stuff. Because up to this point, we're just getting like hints and trickles of things and a lot of explanations about like technology and evolution and nanotechnology and just kind of establishing some character development with like Jack specifically. Because we meet like a whole other cast of characters that have like, besides Ricky, have like, and the wife, have not been like introduced at all. And so we get a lot of them, including like Hot Asian May, which is a delightful name because it's a super common Chinese name. I think her name's May. It might be some Maya or something. Anyway, so Jack is on a helicopter with some PR guys heading over the fabrication plant. These guys are talking about some hippies like came by. They're environmentalists, and then they found like a dead animal, and they made some complaint, and then they were there illegally, and the PR guys, but still the PR guys have to do something about it. So Jack talks to him for a little bit. And when they land, one of the guys gets out of the helicopter to like take a piss, even though they were specifically told do not get out at any juncture. And then Jack gets taken to the facility and dropped off, while the rest of them like head out. And then when he enters the facility, there's like this absurdly ridiculous like cleaning procedure, right? Like when you're looking at like an airlock in like a futuristic show or whatever, where they like spray him down and hose him and all this stuff. It's more sci-fi than that, but he has to go through this thing so that no dirt at all is possible to like come in, because it's like a fabrication plant for nanomachines. So like even the smallest amount of dirt could like cause huge amounts of problems. And then he talks to like the security guard, who's this fast talking guy, and at some point he gets done talking with him, and then Ricky comes over to like take him around, and he thinks the same thing about that. He was thinking about Julia. Like Ricky looks thinner, he looks more in shape, he looks like super fantastic. Like even when he only saw him like a couple days ago, he looks like much better, which is very interesting. And it's also something that his wife mentioned as well. They talk about Julia, how she's doing in the hospital and stuff like that. They talk about the plant. They talk about the security guy and whatnot. And then he takes him to his room. And so they have this whole residential block, and because he's going to probably be here for like a day or two to get this stuff set up, so he's gonna like hang tight and whatnot. And that's cool because his sister is back at the house like taking care of all the kids and whatnot. And then they meet up with a couple of the old co-workers of Jack's. There's like this busty Hispanic lady and then nerd engineer. And none of these people are that important, to be completely honest. They like are just there for fodder for like the for the not trauma. What do you call? I just said this fucking word. For the like the theater of the whole thing. And Ricky gets real short with them because, you know, they're screwing around or laughing or having a good time or something. And then Jack notes that this is just like Julia with like the kids or with him, how just like very little seems to like make him very angry or whatever. Jack at that point gets a call from the doctor because he's like, hey, your wife needs like an MRI, and she absolutely refuses to get one. And also she needs to get a psych evaluation, which she's also refusing. And so the doctor wants Jack to talk to her about that, or wanted to talk to him. It's like, hey, she seems like she's on meth or something, or like, is there anything going on, whatever. And then at this point, Ricky's getting like super impatient because he's waiting for Jack to finish the call or whatever. And so Jack's like, no drugs or anything that I'm tracking, and like, I'll give you a call. I'll try calling her later and see if I can get her to do this MRI or whatever. And the doctor's like, all right, sounds good. They then go to meet the other 3 members of the team. So there's the security guy, there's Ricky, there's busty Hispanic lady, there's her nerd boyfriend, and then there's the other 3. And these are like slightly more important characters. There's a Chinese girl, then there's like rude guy, and then there's like other nerd. And when they walk in there, they're all nervous and tense, which the Hispanic chick and the engineer nerd were as well, which Jack notes is kind of odd. Like, why are they so upset or concerned? It seems like he's not getting all the information. At that point, Ricky takes him to this whole other area of the fabrication plant. They talk about what's really going on here, that they're not making this stuff for medical staff, that this is actually, everything's been funded by like the military, so they're military contractors, and that originally they were set up, they won like a bid for a contract to make nanomachines they could use for recon, because they can like fly and they can like form like a camera essentially by connecting their pieces and like record things, and then they can like fly back and it's like undetectable and like no anti-air or any of that kind of stuff. So it's like the perfect recon thing, and that's like the promise, and that the medical stuff is just like a front to get like extra money. It's like, oh, while we're doing this, we can also do this. And that then they talk about how like the problem is with the nanomachines is the control of the nanomachines, and that's a lot has to do with just like the weather, because they're so small. Like if the wind blows, they get like blown because they don't have enough like energy to like push back, and they don't have enough mass to not be pushed about by the wind. And then it talks about how they're using like this predator-prey protocol that Jack invented at his previous company, which he's now contracted working for, that they're using. That's why his like prior company is like involved with his wife's company, because of like this protocol specifically. And that's why like all these people who were like teammates of his or like worked for him at the other company are here, because they just kept working on like the predator-prey protocol, because they were thinking like, hey, if we could get, this is like a way to help us have some sort of control over the nanomachines, besides just like the float in the wind, just having them, giving them direction to like do certain things, and then the predator-prey protocol is going to like be helped, and that's why it's the name of the book's Prey, right? Anyway, so they're still using it, and that there has been some, and he mentions that there's been some problems with it. So then they hit up like the actual fabrication part of the fabrication plant, and he talks about it's kind of weird. It's very cold, or cold enough for assemblers, unless they're molecule level. Oh, okay. He talks about how it doesn't, the fabrication plant seems like kind of odd, like it's very, very cold. And that they only need to be that cold if like you're doing fabrication at like a molecular level. And then when he kind of brings it up, Ricky gets super dodgy about it and stuff. And then he's like, well, I don't know why this guy's being so dodgy, because they have the ability to make molecular assemblers. And this is kind of what I was talking about before with like microchips making, like they're building machines to make smaller machines, to make smaller machines, to make smaller machines, so they can make smaller microchips, like in Taiwan or whatever. So there's just like a series of like machines making smaller fabrication devices or assemblers, so they can create even smaller devices, and they can use like smaller machines, like these micro machines essentially, to construct these things to be like super small. And then, but it's like, hey, what's the deal with like this or that? And they get talking about it, and then bacteria comes into play, because they utilize they found the way to like make the actual nanomachines is they had to use bacteria to create the assemblers, because they needed it like on such a microscopic scale. And so then like the assemblers attach themselves to the bacteria, and the bacteria somehow helps them produce like these super micro cameras and stuff. So it's not just like a nanomachine, it's like an ecological. And what they're using, the bacteria they're using is E. coli, right? Which is not the worst thing, right? Anyway, and so the problem with that is that E. coli is in the human gut, right? So it's very common. And so Jack has concerns about this, because like it's like now you're dealing with like human biology essentially, or things that can affect humans directly, or cause some sort of like side effect or whatever. And Ricky kind of blows it off, because, hey, the bacteria works great indoors. Unfortunately, so this is where they start talking about the breeze knocking stuff away and whatnot. And then Jake is like, well, that's an engineering issue. I don't understand the software problem. Like, why'd you bring me over here? I'm not an engineer. I'm a software designer or whatever. And then Ricky gets super dodgy again. Like, this whole time he's just like, kind of like, he avoids questions. He like changes the subject. And it's like, bro, do you want my help or not? The fuck? Anyway, and he says, hey, well, there's also another problem. So he talks about how like they had some contractors who came over here to like deal with something, and that they let some of the nano cameras escape the facility because they left like an air vent open at the top. And so he's like, so I don't understand the problem with that, because like, if the nanomachines get out into the desert, they're just gonna like run out of power and deteriorate. And then Ricky's about to say something when some alarm goes off, and then they go check it out, and it's like, oh, hey, one of the swarms has gone wild, and it's because they can't control it anymore. So the swarm is like a swarm of nanomachines that gathers together and like works together. It's called a swarm because like one nanomachine doesn't do anything, but like a bunch of nanomachines can like combine forces, kind of like insects or whatever. And then Jack's looking at this thing with everybody else, and he's like, I don't understand. How does this fucking make sense? Like, how do they get their power? And then they're like, solar power. And it's like, dumbasses. And it's like, well, yeah, but at night. Because it's like their solar generators or batteries only have enough power for like 3 hours. And so at night, they all just break up. And that what Ricky tells them is that every night they go out and try to find the swarms so they can like destroy them or whatever, and that there's at least 3 swarms that kind of escaped and have been doing things. And then at some point it comes up that they've been reproducing and that they've been adapting. It's like, the fuck? And it's like, well, how are they not getting blown away by the wind? And he's like, well, I think they're hiding. And it's like, God damn it, what the fuck? Oh, man. And then at some point, they're looking at the one swarm, and then like 2 other swarms like step out of it, like super creepy as fuck. And it's like, oh, they've been hiding inside each other. They're getting wise. And that they've been trying to get in the facility like this whole time. And then they see a rabbit kind of hop out, and then all the swarms like hunt the rabbit down. And because it's based on the program, right, the Predator Prey program, and so they kill it, and it looks like they like peel it away, like they eat it or whatever. And Jack is like, "What the fuck?" He's also a little bit dismissive of the swarm's behavior. He mentioned. And then after the swarm's kind of like peace out, he says he's going to go out and check the rabbit and such. And then we get the narrator stating that they should have found out what had happened to the rabbit sooner, how it was killed, because that would have helped them know what happened next. And so a bit later, Jack is going out and is like, hey, anyone else coming out with me? And they're like, nope, go fuck yourself. And he's like, all right, whatever. I'm going to go check this out. I'm pretty sure this Predator Prey protocol has something to do with this or whatever. That they're not actually hunting. They're just responding to like the algorithm again. And the hunting the rabbit is part of that or whatever. Then May, the Chinese girl, decides to come out with him. She's some sort of like biology something or other. So she wants to take like some animal, she wants to take some of the animal stuff and kind of glance at it and stuff. So they head out there. She starts dissecting the thing. And then it looks like it was actually strangled by nanomachines. Like they went into like the throat. So they take some and made it so the rabbit couldn't breathe. That's how they killed it. So then they take some blood. May secretly takes a sample of meat, even though she's told specifically not to. And then they get a call that they need to run back. Oh, no. Then she's like, oh, hey, I need to run back real quick to get something from the inside that I left there. And that leaves Jack outside by himself. And then he's looking at the rabbit a little bit more, and he notices the skin is super pink, just like his baby's skin was super pink. And he's like, that's interesting. And so he asks the guys watching the camera to look at it. And then at that point, one of the guys is like, hey, you should get back right now. The clouds are coming. And so he makes a break for it. But then the clouds like block him off. And it looks like they're surrounding him and ready to attack him. So he takes his shirt off and swings it around to them. And then rushes at the door. So he's able to like kind of push them away a little bit. And then he gets to the door. And he's like starting to like pass out, having a headache, all this stuff. He heads into the airlock, which cleanses him completely. And then he like gets in through that. So he doesn't have any of the nanomachines on him anymore or anything like that. But then once he gets inside, he completely passes out. A little bit later, Jack wakes up and he's in May's lab. She is telling him. She tells him someone. Oh, he's like, what happened? And she's like, oh, someone else will tell you about that. And so they do. Some other people come in. They talk about the swarm, how the swarm got in, and how like when they went through the cleansing process, like wiped it all away and whatnot. And then he finds out Ricky had not been telling him the full extent of like the issues that occurred. That when the contractors had come and blown this stuff out, that it was a lot more than what Ricky initially had said. And so it wasn't just like a tiny little bit that went out there and then like self-reproduced or whatever. It was like a lot. And then also the bacteria, the E. coli got sent out there as well. And so they've been able to reproduce because they had the nanomachines and they had the bacteria. So essentially they had created like a little processing capabilities with their evolution and whatnot. And also that, let's see. Oh, yeah. And then he got a message from his wife, and his wife is telling him not to get involved, that he should just leave and not worry about it and whatever, because if he does anything, it'll make it worse, and like make what worse. And so Jack then talks to the guy about how they created the plague. He talks to the guy about creating a mechanical plague, how this thing's going to spread and it can just kill and do all this stuff. And the guy's like, yep, that's a problem. And then they discuss about keeping about coming back to the fabrication plant, how the swarm seem to be like trying to come home for some reason. Like maybe they're trying to reproduce more. They seem to have some sort of idea about something. And then the guy's like, no, it's because they're territorial or whatever. It's because of the Hunter Prairie thing or whatever. This is their home base. And Jack's like, no, it's bullshit. I made this thing. That's not what it's like. And the guy's like, well, maybe it's because of your wife. And then Chuck's like, my wife? So later Jack calls his wife, but she's not at the hospital. She just like pieced the fuck out. The guy reveals that and this is, I can't remember which guy, it's like nerd guy or whatever, that when it first happened, like when they first, the escaping of the stuff, they noticed the swarms, and that she headed out there and she like interacted with it because she was like a child psychologist or had some sort of child psychology or psychology background, remember? And then she became very enamored with one of them. It was the smallest one, and it started to like follow her around kind of like a child or like an animal. And they would like play games and stuff, and she would talk to it. And Jack's like, Jesus Christ. Like, literally, he's like, Jesus Christ, Julie, what the fuck? And then he's like, fuck her. We gotta destroy this thing. I don't give a fuck what my wife's doing. And Rick is like, oh yeah, and then the nerd guy's like, hey man, good luck. Rick is in 100% agreement with Julia, so good luck. And then Jack goes to see May finally, and then she shows him like the bacterial growth patterns and whatnot, and how they're like all fucked up. And she mentions that she mentions how she knows he's gonna go confront Ricky. And then later they have this meeting. He tells them they are going to like corner the swarm, and then they're gonna hunt them down at night. Or no, they're gonna color them. They're gonna get them with some sort of like isotope that's gonna make them like glow in the dark, and then at night they can go hunt them down and stuff. And then everyone's like, yeah, that's a great idea actually. Why didn't we think of it before? And Ricky's like, no. And then Ricky gets like super upset about the whole thing, and he's tired. He's too tired. Oh, because he's too tied into the company being successful and making money and whatnot. And also because the swarm stuff is probably attached to him, just like Julia. And they had like their little baby thing, right? She like brought some of the swarm back and it got into the baby, and the MRI pulled all the shit out because of metal and whatnot, the pink skin and blah, blah, blah. So also her looking tighter and whatnot. I mean, that's my guess. So they got these isotopes that they need to use to color the swarm, but they're out in this like storage area that's like not attached to the main fabrication plant. Because of course, otherwise there'd be no. of course, that's why. So the rest of the team, aside from Ricky and the security guard, are gonna help Jack go and get that figured out. Then Ricky takes Jack aside and tells, and like yells at him not to do it, to leave it alone. Jack's like, "Hey, how about you go fuck yourself? This is happening." And then Jack like changes his tune like real quick and is like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. Thanks so much." And then obviously Ricky has got some sort of like betrayal planned, like 100%. Jack at that point goes and checks in with May. He's like, hey, maybe you should stay. And she's like, no, I want to go because of the rabbit. I want to get some more information. Like something's really up with this whole fucking thing. And so they all head out. They check out the rabbit, and then they head over to the other building. And inside they not only find the isotopes, but they find thermite. Hell yeah, thermite. Thermite is like it like burns white hot, which is like you use it to like bust tanks open and shit. Like it's pretty powerful. It'll like murder you real quick. And then they find some other like random stuff. May's like working on something when Jack gets like a call from his son inside here or whatever, and he's complaining about, or he's on his cell phone or something. I was confused by how he got this call, but the son is like complaining about the sister and the aunt, and it's because they went up to the hospital. They saw Julia, and then the sister mentioned that Jack was in Nevada. And then Jack has access to some computer here because he was trying to access a computer at the fabrication plant, but Ricky like wouldn't let him. But now he has access to this computer, so he like logs in. He's looking at the code, and then he mentions that like, or he's thinking about how like the code is missing parts of it, and he asks around, and everyone's like, I don't know where the code could be. Like it should be in there, right, or whatever. Then they get ready to leave, but part of the reason they were able to like come out here in the first place is because like the swarms can't stay together when there's a lot of wind, and so the wind was pretty high. But now that the wind is like dying down, the swarms are going to be able to come out. And so the swarms, as the wind dies down, the swarms come back, and it's like dun dun dun. And this time instead of being 3, there's 4 of them. And then one of the guys is like, they're like, hey, we should just bunker down here and wait for the wind to pick back up or nighttime, otherwise they're gonna like fucking murder us. And one of the guys is like, nah, I can't do it, I'm gonna go. And so he tries to make a run for it, which is totally wrong. And so now not only is this asshole like got the swarm like noticing him or whatever, but now they gotta like hide inside this building where they obviously can come and like search around now because the doors are open and they've been like alerted to like this being a thing. So that guy's a total asshole. So they all hide and wait, and then the swarms like meander on in, and then Jack comes up with this whole thing about flocking, because like when there's a hunter or there's like a prey, there's predator, that's what it is, predator, prey. When there's a predator, it gets confused when like everyone's together. That's why like herds move around together, or like birds flock and stuff, because then it's waiting for like the weak link to like go attack, because there's a bunch of them. It's like, well, I don't know if I should go in there because it's just one of me and like 20 of them, and like maybe I'll kill one of them, but then they're gonna stomp me to death, right? Like with the herds and whatnot. And so they all do the exact same behavior, and they're clapping and moving at the same time, and it works because the swarm just is standing there staring at them. It's like confused and doesn't exactly know what to do, or like who it should target or whatever. But then right as they're about to like escape and everything's working out great, the asshole guy, like the original, like, so we met the 2 people and the 3 people. So it's the nerd guy for like the first group. I think he actually might be an engineer. He's also the guy who opened the door. He's like, I can't do this, and he like makes a run for it. And then the swarm's like, oh hell yeah, the weak link. So they all charge him, and they all cover him up, and then he dies. And then the busty Latina chick, like, she freaks out because I guess they're in a relationship. I don't know. These 2 people barely have anything going on in this story whatsoever, and then they just like they die right here. So the Latina girl like freaks out and tries to run. They grab her. It's like, come on, we gotta go. That guy's like fucking dead. And she's like, no. And she goes and like lays down quietly and like dies as well. And it's like, what a dumb bitch. The fuck. And so the other 3. Because there's May, other nerd guy. There's like 3 nerd guys, and May all went, and then Ricky, third nerd guy, as security guard, stayed behind. Bob, I think, is the guy who stayed behind. I think this guy is like Norton or something. So Bob could like monitor and like help out, especially because Jack doesn't trust Ricky. So when they head out, they're flocking and everything, and then they run into the 4th one, which is just hanging out there. So Jack thinks about prey safety areas and all that, and so the swarm, because they're predators, they like won't enter certain areas because it's like the prey have established like a firm stronghold there, essentially, which I guess is a thing. So they head towards the vehicles because they're going to hold up in there because the swarm will have a harder time getting in there, like another building or whatever. And so the swarms start moving around, and at some point Ricky like notifies them that Julia's coming out, and they're like, no one cares, asshole, like shut the fuck up. And so we're about to get killed. And so the swarm starts moving around the vehicles, and then one of them shimmers and starts trying to replicate May. And this is one of the way like prey hunts, or no, predators hunt, is that they use mimicry, right, to like confuse the prey to like trust it or whatever. And this is seen in like bugs and stuff. And then and so one of the guys, so the nerd guy, I can't remember his name, Norton? We're going to call him Norton. Norton is like in the one car, and then Jack and May are in like the other car. And so the guy who's in the other guy who's out in the other car, when the swarm gets in there, starts spraying isotopes around like everything. And then May and Jack's car starts to get invaded too, and they like bust out and make a break for it. And then they make it inside where the security like access chamber, like the air chamber, like blows all the fucking swarm off of them and destroys it. And then Jack's like, who's going to go out and get the other guy? To like the 3 guys who are left, like Ricky, the security guard, and Bob. And they're like, nobody. And so Jack's like, fuck you guys. He's like, I'm going to go do it. And then we get this like, every now and then we get like a narrator, Jack, who's like talking about things. And it says, and he's like, this is exactly what Ricky wanted. The fuck? So he heads out. Oh, Charlie. Sorry, it's not Norton, it's Charlie. I apologize. So he heads out and he finds Charlie. But he can't carry him because Charlie's a big fat fuck. And so he finds like a bike, and then he's like, God damn it, I need a key. And the swarm's like starting to come back because they like did what they need to do, but he's like still alive barely. But he finds the key inside, like it's like one of those things where it's like, oh, it's on the tire in like the vehicle over here or whatever, because the guy whose vehicle it belongs to is like always like he's like very concerned about something. I don't know. He has like a whole reasoning why this would work, which is good writing, but it's kind of silly at the same time. So he grabs him, throws him on the bike. They drive back. They head back inside the station, and then like some time goes by, and it's like now the swarm has gone up to like 20, so there's 20 of them. And so they just like burst through all the swarms. They're like congealed about the building and whatnot, head into the airlock. And then it's like the swarm's coming in at this point because the door is open and the airlock hasn't started kicking them out. And it's like, fuck. And it's like, well, you got to only one person can go in at a time, and you have to be standing, so they can't just be lying there. And so he's got to like stand up, and he's got to pick up this fat fuck, Charlie, so that the thing will activate. And so he does that, and then finally it fucking activates, knocks everything else out. And he doesn't. He's having a hard time figuring it out. It's a whole thing where like Bob and May are trying to like pantomime, like pick him the fuck up, stand up. But yeah, he finally figures it out, and then he does, and it blows all this shit off him, saving their lives, and then he passes out again. Yep. So then later on, Jack wakes up, and Ricky is standing there being like a super creep, and he gives him a printout of like the code that he was looking for earlier, and it's like, hey motherfucker, why are you giving me a printout? It's like shady as shit, bro. And it is. It's like, just give me access to the computer. And he's like, yeah, why can't I just access the computer and get to those files? And then him and Ricky like argue, and then Ricky like takes off, and Jake's like looking at the stuff. At this point he calls his kids, and the kids are still fighting, and he tells his kids, hey, you need to listen to Aunt Sarah or whatever her name is. And they mention that Julia is going on a flight after leaving the hospital to come over to Nevada. And the whole time he's just looking at like security cameras while his kids are like blathering on about whatever. And then he sees something that's kind of weird looking. This the guy who freaked out is gone. Oh, and then it's over at the other building, and he sees that like the other guy, the nerd guy, and the busty Latina chick, like they're gone. Like they've been like dragged off somewhere because they died in like an area where the camera could see them, but now they're gone. And he's like, that's weird. They must have dragged them off or something. Later on, they're all having like dinner together, and while they're eating, they notice a person outside. It's a young blonde guy. Jack is like, oh, it's the same. It looks exactly like the guy who was in Julia's car, and it also looks exactly like Ricky, which is interesting. So he's got the same shirt and everything. And Ricky's like, don't worry about it, I don't care. And then the guy outside, one of the things they notice is that it looks like Ricky, but he has no facial features. And so the swarm mimicry capabilities are like evolving and becoming stronger and stronger. And it's like, all right, well, we got to wait till night, and then one of the swarms got like the isotopes, so then we can go track it down with like a Geiger counter or whatever, because it's radioactive. So Charlie's like fucking, he's knocked out because he got almost eaten up. Security guard is still being an asshole and just not helping. And then Ricky obviously is the super asshole. And he also wants to stay behind because Julia's coming and we'll make sure she's good to go or whatever. And so May, Jack, and the last guy, Bobo, they head out to track down like this thing. So they go around, they go back to the building, and it's like, yeah, the busty Hispanic lady and the other guy are gone. So they grab up the thermite this time and some other shit, and then they find another vehicle with a key, and this is the security guy. And then they're like, hey motherfucker, like what the heck? There's another vehicle like right here with a key just in it. And then he's like, oh, no one asked me about that. And it's like, God, fuck you, dude. So he uses a Geiger counter to track down the radiation. So time goes by, they get lost, and then they find the swarm has passed over this river, and they're like, oh, that's why you can't find them, or like they're being weird because they're like flying over this thing, and so it becomes hard. So then Bobby like stays on this side while May and Jack head over on this like bridge or something, and they have a look, and they find the swarm dragging the Hispanic lady's body, just like dragging along, and they start talking about evolution. The swarms are evolving for generations because their lifespan is so short. So it's like bugs. It's like, the lifespan's like a week versus a year. It's like everything's expedited like thousands and thousands of times because they just live and die so quickly that the next stage of evolution like happens much faster. And so they're able to set up like these plans that last much longer than life cycle. So then these like swarms are like resting, not using any energy, and then one of the swarms goes off and like drags the body, runs out of energy, and the next swarm like picks up the body and starts dragging it as well. So it's like they have these like lifelong plans and these evolving things. Anyway, so they follow the body being dragged to a cave, and then they examine it with this like fancy looking camera, and they see that the swarm are transforming to Ricky, they're transforming to the Hispanic girl, into the coward guy. They're doing a lot of fucking stuff. And May's like, I've been to this cave before. It's weird. It used to have a bunch of bats. And Jack is going to head in there and use some thermite to blow the whole thing up to just fucking destroy the place, kill the swarm. And he mentions that the swarm look more and more like human, that now besides just having like a look, they're starting to get facial features, they're starting to have like realistic looking skin developed and whatnot. And at that point, like a helicopter comes swarming in, and the swarm are scared of the helicopter because of the wind, right? Obviously, so the blades flatten all the swarm because of the super hard wind. And then it takes off, and then May like calls the helicopter back, and the helicopter just like hovers, and this allows Jack and May to like go ahead and get in there. And they've created like this mound around this cave, which is kind of like a termite mound. So they jump down into the cave entrance, and then she pulls out a thermite and a lighter, and they head in there and they start blowing the shit out of the swarm with like the thermite all over the place. And then they find a bunch of worms in the ground, and they seem to have created some sort of like symbiotic relationship with the swarm. So the worms are able to like help them with, I don't know, the biology of like the E. coli and getting the access to like the things they need. It's a lot of like technical bullshit, magic, a lot of magic. So magic worms and the magic E. coli are like working together, and that's how like the swarm are able to like evolve and continue to reproduce or whatever. So they fight, and then all of a sudden there's like a giant explosion, and then the Jack gets like knocked out a little bit again, and then May gets him up, and they keep killing the swarm, and then they start to like run out of thermite, but there's more swarm. Like there's so fucking many swarm, and they've created like an artificial like fabrication plant here or whatever. So they run, and then near the entrance of the cave, Bobby has finally showed up, and he's created like a giant fucking Molotov cocktail out of like the ATV that he was driving around, and he runs into the cave, and he's like. And he's like, I'm going to blow the shit out of this place. You better move. And so they all run out, and then he pushes like the ATV in and lights the thing on fire. And then the helicopter is like there, or it's like getting close. And so they wave it off, like, get the fuck out of here before you get blown up. And so then the whole thing goes like, boom, and blows up the whole fucking cave system. It gets completely destroyed. Jack is knocked out again, but he wakes up and he's on the helicopter this time, and he's stunned, and May and Bobby are there, and they're all okay. And this takes us to day 7. So the next day in the morning, Julia meets up with Jack. They talk. She wants to celebrate with champagne. She's like very concerned about the champagne. Like nobody wants to drink fucking champagne, Julia. But she's like, no, we should all drink it. Something. And she's like, you saved the company, yada yada. And then her and Ricky are acting super sus. And May and Bobby are also notice it, and they're like, no, we're just gonna chill and not drink your poison champagne. Obviously poison champagne. And then Jack's like, we need to call the army and tell them what's going on here so they can take care of this. And then Julia's like, okay, I'll call the army. And then she's like, oh, no one's answering. Something must be wrong. And then Jack's like, she puts on a terrible show. She's the worst liar ever. And it's like, so he picks it up, and the line is not working. So, oh, well, what are you going to do? Julia then talks to Jack. Her very, very odd behavior is super more obvious and continues. Talk about the family and them being together still. And Jack is like, yeah, I'll think about it, you crazy bitch. And then they notice that Charlie is locked in his room with a swarm. Oh no, how the fuck did the swarm get in there? What's going on with that? And so Jake's livid about this whole thing, or Jack's livid. He's like, the fuck? And then May placates Julia, even though she's acting super sus. And so is Ricky about this whole thing, and they're super they're not upset that Charlie's in there with a swarm. They're just like, oh, something, blah, blah, blah. And then Jack has like so many questions that are not getting answered. But there's something they can do aside from block the room so that the swarm can't get out. And then everyone's like going to bed. And so May clearly wants to talk to Jack about something, but Julia won't give her any space. And then because she's jealous of May, I guess, because May's supposed to be super hot, because Ricky's wife had like the same concern about May. And she's Chinese, which is the best. Anyway, and then May says something about looking out. Jack should watch his back or whatever. Julia comes over. He has some words with her. And then he's like, all right, get out of here. And then May leaves as well. Julia really wants to hang out, but Jack's like, no, I just want to go to sleep. Like, get out of here. A little bit later, he gets woken up because Ricky is trying to make out with him, but he gets interrupted by Julia. This interruption is like, he's like, what the fuck is this crazy dream? Am I having a crazy dream? And then they say a lot of sketchy things about algorithms and fighting it. And then they leave. And then Jack has like another dream. And this time Jack wakes up and everyone's asleep aside from, like, everyone's asleep in like their rooms except for May. So he goes and checks out the champagne bottle, and he's like, something's seriously up with this shit. So he starts to question, and he's like, Julia's definitely up to something. Like, this is some crazy bullshit. And he thinks about Charlie and his death. And then he decides to go to the computer room to see if he can get some more information, because he feels like Julia was trying to distract him earlier. And there he finally finds May working on something. And then he's like, oh, I thought Ricky said this doesn't work. And she's like, yeah, that was some old bullshit. It's more lies piled upon lies. So May gets concerned about Jack seeing something. Like, she turns her monitor off, and he's like, just show it to me, fucking May. Like, Jesus Christ. And so she shows him, and it's Julia and Ricky, and they're kissing very passionately. And then he's kind of sad and pissed off because he kind of suspected like she was cheating, but it's like way more crazy than that. And she's like, oh, that's not even the worst part. And he's like, do they fuck? And she's like, nope, a little bit crazier than that. So you see Ricky and Julia doing something to the bottles and the glasses. And then Charlie walks in and he sees something, and then he runs to make a call. So they chase him down. And so he can't get to the call. And then something smashes Ricky in the head, which he just like fucking shrugs off. And then Vincent, the security guard guy, he comes in, and the three of them surround Charlie, and like they're hunting him, right? Like the Velociraptors from the Jurassic Park movie. And then the two men, Vincent and Ricky, like subdue him, like hold him down. And then Julia goes in and kisses him like long and hard. And as she steps away, they see a river of black from her lips to his, and it's the swarm cloud. So obviously she's infecting people with like the swarm cloud. They then like knock him down, and they're laughing at him and stuff. At this point, Julia walks up into the room where they're in, and she's like, "I want to kiss Jack," and he's like, "Obviously to infect me, so hell no." And so he's like, "Nope." So he heads into the kitchen, and then Ricky and Vincent and Bobby come in, and they're all harassing him, and eventually he's able to like get out of there because obviously Bobby's also been infected by this thing at this juncture as well. And then he runs into May, and he's like, "Hey, everyone's infected but the two of us. Hopefully not you two, but like we were just together, so I'm assuming not." And it's because they slept with the lights. And he could tell he knows this now because everyone was sleeping with the lights on, but him and May, or she mentions this, and he's like, "Yeah, I think you're right." So they're trapped. So what can they do? They're stuck here. That these swarm have evolved in all these different directions, and in this direction that they've evolved, so there's like the wild swarm outside, and then there's like a different swarm here, and these swarm can attach to hosts, which are humans. And then she starts crying, and then Jack's thinking about like evolution and stuff because he's like, fucking women. And he's thinking about the allergic reactions to the swarm, the E. coli, about viruses and phages, and he's like, "Hey, if we can push out a phage, which is a virus," and they talk about making this phage in the fabrication plant and spreading it through the whole thing through like the water system or whatever. But there's like a whole complicated issue where it's like, well, they have a security code. Who has a security code? Ricky has it. They can't put the phage in there because once the fabrication detects that there's like a source that is going to destroy like the reproduction, it's going to stop. And even with the code, it's going to like overheat. The phage stuff's going to overheat everything, and the whole place is going to explode. It's like, all right, we have a new plan. And he's like, all right, so you go distract them, or he wants to use May to distract them, but not tell her about it. And he's not going to, or he tells her about it, but then he has like a real plan that he's not going to tell her about it. It's like this whole crazy thing. And he's like, and he's thinking to himself, "I don't like lying to her, but we just need more time." And so she has some phage or some virus that she's created that kind of fights off the E. coli or the virus or something. Somehow it destroys or doesn't allow the host to attach or something. And so they drink some of it, and it's like completely disgusting or gross, but it's like, it's going to protect them. And then they head off. And he watches her, so she goes into the kitchen, like on a camera, with the phage, and she offers the phage to the group to cure the infection, and they all refuse, and Julia questions May about where Jack is. And then they surround her because they're going to attack her, and then Julia starts to harass May, and then May, like, reveals the plan because Julia's, like, torturing her, kind of. And then Julia goes to kiss May and then leaves. And then they go to hunt down Jack, and they catch up with him. He's got like a whole jug of the phage, and he's like going to like the sprinkler system to like get all that turned on or to put a fabrication plant in or whatever. So they grab him, and then they toss him into the magnet room, and the magnet room is like a giant MRI because they're going to use it to like overheat or like crush him or I don't know, something. It's going to kill him. So unless he tells them where the phage is, and it's like, bro, the phage was in there. Oh, that's right. When they were chasing him, he like tossed the little jug like somewhere to hide it, so they couldn't find it. And he's in there, and he's like freaking out because the plan's going to fail. And he didn't expect them to throw him into this giant MRE thing. And then he's like, all right, I'll tell you guys, but I'm going to tell Julia. So they shut it off. Julia comes in, and then she's like, good news, the helicopter is here. You can leave. And so she's pretending that she's going to send him home if he just gives her the phage and whatnot, and that he should just accept the new situation. And she's super excited, actually, that they killed like the wild type of nanomachines out there. And so now the host ones that is her, Ricky, Bobby, and Vincent can flourish. And so they hug, and then he asks about the MRI and how it cured their daughter. And then he holds on to her, and then she starts to freak out. He hits the MRI button inside because it's got a button inside apparently that will turn it on. And then she immediately gets like disintegrated. But not all of her, because it's just like all the nanomachines get dragged off to the side. And all that's left is like a Julia who looks like the original Julia, but she's all withered because clearly the nanomachines and the nanomachines have been like eating her up from the outside. And she talks about how she kissed the children, so they have some of the nanomachines in them as well, and they're going to start invading them as well. And then she's apologizing as the particles. She got some on her, and they started to take over, and they started to affect her ability. And he takes out the phage, but she like will not drink it. And the thing like takes over again because the MRI machine dies down. And he mentions that he's done and that he will take them all out and then protect the children. And then he grabs like a vial that he has on him. So he has the big jug and he has like little vials, and he like tosses at them and smashes down, which causes them all to leap back. At that point, he makes a run for it. He goes, grabs a jug, he beats up Vince, and then kicks Ricky off like a ladder as he's climbing up to the sprinkler system. And then Ricky like climbs back up, he kicks him free again. Vince is taking the elevator to meet him up there. And then the Julia Swarm like flies up to him and hits him, and then Ricky grabs him again. And he's about to give up, but like, his kids. So he's able to like muscle through. And then Ricky gets knocked down for good. And then Julia's like, they're both standing there looking at him. And then Vince is up at the top and watching him. And then Jack comes up, and he's like throws he like swings the vial up there to get Vincent to back up, and then he heads up, and then Vincent grabs a tarp to cover himself and rushes at Jack, and then he hits him a couple times, and they like slip down. Um, um, oh no, and then Vincent like slips and falls off the edge, so it's just Jack at the top now. So he gets the jug and he pours it all into like the water tank and then seals it, and so then he comes down and he finds them all gathered together in the fabrication room, and they start talking. He's like, "Where's May? May's missing." Julia's like rambling about this and that, and then Julia then like covers Jack with like her like nano body or whatever, and then she goes back to Julia's body, and now she looks like Jack. And then they talk about time, and then like what is his secret? And then all the men go to grab him, and he starts a fire and holds it up to sprinklers, but nothing happens. She mentions that Ricky turned off the security lock, so there are no sprinklers. And then the same security that stops the virus from overheating the fabrication plant can turn off the sprinklers. So when you turn off the safety, it means the sprinklers aren't going to go off, but it also means that the fabrication plant is not going to stop because it's going to overheat and explode. And so they grab him and start beating him, and then they hear a pop. And they get off him, and it's all the tubes are starting to break because with the safety system off, he got the phage. There was some phage they put. So if they keep the safety system off, the plant's going to like explode and destroy all of them. But if they turn it on, the sprinklers are going to come on, and they're all going to be fucked. And so it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And May shows up because May took some of the phage as well after they like tried to possess her, and she started putting it in the fabrication plant and like so it started it up. And so then the methane, there's a lot of methane like filling up the building because the whole place is going to just explode because the safety thing's off or whatever. And then, and so at some point, they're able to get. Oh, so the virus. She put the virus in like the system, the fabrication system, or like the air circulation system or whatever. So it's blowing on them and destroying them. And so then they're able to get like the safety system. They turn the safety system on. To get the sprinklers to like stop that from happening or something. Sorry, it's really confusing. Okay, so let's start over. So the plan was they were going to put the phage in the sprinkler system and have it like blow through if the safety system was turned off, so that either way they're going to get phaged. And so then they get that, the sprinklers pour, and then so they start getting killed, but then the whole place is filling up with methane as well because the fabrication plant's still going, right? Or something, and so then they have to like run out of the place real quick, and there's a helicopter. The helicopter was there, that was true, so they're just like hanging out there. And then he's like, "Where were you this whole time?" And she's like, "I was putting thermite all throughout the building, so the whole thing like explodes," which it does. So they blow up the fabrication plant, like bam, everyone's dead. And then they destroyed it, and they made it some nanomachines, and yada yada yada. But later, then we kind of go back to the very beginning of the book, where it's like everyone's throwing up, and he's worried about his kids surviving through the night because he went home and gave the phage to everybody. He gave it to the baby and to the two kids and to the aunt, and so everyone's like vomiting up the nanomachines and like super sick, and like their skin's all bad and stuff. And he's talking about how he's like waiting for May, and he took some more phage, but he feels kind of okay. They called the army and told them about all that fucking stuff that was going on about the company, and then about what happened. And then he thinks about like and then it's like we get a reiteration of like the most obvious thing, how the baby was infected and the MRI pulled the stuff away, and that the vacuum crew was like a real. It was like the military showing up to like get rid of all the nanomachines and like do stuff, and that these nanomachines, these assemblers for the nanomachines, they're the ones who are like destroying the memory chips and all this stuff. And then May took some of the phage back to her biolab and created like a thing, just in case there's like more out there, so they have a way to like destroy it or whatnot. But the army's like going to go burn everything into the fucking ground and like bomb the shit out of that like plant area. And then like the last mystery of the book that he's like thinking about is like, why did they keep returning to the plant? Like, why did the wild swarms keep going back? And he's like, that was not part of the prey protocol. And then finally he's like finally gets access to this data that Ricky was trying to keep from him the whole time. And this he finds out that there was no contractors that were the problem, that Ricky and Julia purposely released some of the nanomachines and E. coli and everything out into the wild to see if they would naturally evolve and find a way to survive the wind issue so they could do their own thing. So they created this whole thing. So there was not an accident at all. And then once they did that, they started seeing that it kind of evolved into people, and that they got infected with the same thing and then evolved some more. And so it was like it was like hubris, like they got destroyed by their own like design or whatever. Because it was able to evolve on its own. And then the book ends with like him watching May walk up to the house with like a whole cleaning crew. They're going to like take care of things, make sure the kids and family are all right. And he looks hopefully, and it's like, oh, good news. So the sister is still sick at this point after he's had all these thinking and stuff, but the kids are sleeping. And And then he considers, again, the hubris of all the events in the book. And he hopes that mankind will have a better fate in the future. Dun, dun, dun. And that's it. That's Prey. So it was pretty good. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's like a Michael Crichton thriller, right? And it's interesting and different and whatnot. So, yeah, pretty good stuff. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.